Hey, it's Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast. Going to talk about the announcement of Aerosmith retiring from touring and why I think this is a good thing. All good things come to an end. It's what makes life special. If we live forever, look at vampire movies. It just wouldn't be fun. Everything comes to an end. These days, we have the technology that it doesn't always have to come to an end. The band Aerosmith a couple days ago released a statement that after Steven's vocal injury last year, and they had to postpone their final tour, which was supposed to kick off in September with the Black Crowes opening up, they announced at the beginning of August that they couldn't do it, that it was obvious that no matter how hard he'd try, he could not get back into the shape he needed to be for the tour, and they decided as brothers to retire from touring. Now, most of the online sentiments went from sad to feel good for them being able to do this. Now they can, rest on their career, enjoy the fruits of their labor kind of thing. Not that they haven't been doing that the last few years anyway, without the pressures of going out on one final big tour. It's hard to tour. Doing several hundred dates in a row, town to town, shows are brutal these days. They're just brutal hard. It's hot. It's a lot of work to be a musician, especially a rock musician with a giant catalog of hits to play. With the technology we have today, we see a lot of bands not bowing out when they should. Some of these bands should be using the technology if they're going to continue to tour. I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I saw Don Dokken a few years ago. The dude should not be singing. He just should not be singing anymore. Why isn't he miming to a backing tape? I mean, I appreciate that he doesn't want to do that to his fans, but if he's going to go out there and put on a performance that bad, anyway, nothing against Don Dokken. I love me some Dokken. But Aerosmith bows out when they could have easily relied on technology and finished the tour, made millions of dollars. I saw comments from people, this was going to be their first Aerosmith tour. And that's a lot to think about. People that have become fans in the years in between their tours. I remember getting into Aerosmith when I was in elementary school. A friend of mine had a 45 of Walk This Way. We would sing it in the hallways. Our teachers were not happy with this. For a band to have several huge hits that would span their entire career is amazing. Songs like Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion, Dream On. 3 of the biggest rock songs that also got played on pop radio stations, still to this day, 50 years later. It's pretty rare to do. They continue to have some pop sensibilities, but they maintain their rockism. Through the 70s, they became known as the Toxic Twins. Both Steven and Joe had pretty bad habits, and that was a kind of a nod to the Rolling Stones' Glimmer Twins, because that's what Mick and Keith were called. So the Toxic Twins and the rest of the band made it through the 70s and almost imploded. They gave up drugs. It was a very publicized thing. They came back with an album called Done with Mirrors, and that led the path to what we have today. They followed it up with Pump. That album was so huge you can't even imagine. And Get a Grip and on and so forth. Up until now, they have a band that have been able to experiment. They were the first rock band that I remember that stuck rap in one of their songs. They worked with Run DMC on a different version of Walk This Way. They've done country songs, they've done pop songs, and they've maintained a rock band. They always put on a great show. Aerosmith, from 1989 on, came to the South a lot. I was working in Montgomery, Alabama. Most of those years, we put on a rock station there, and Aerosmith is a classic band that had new music out that we could play the crap out of. We were very conservative when we first put that station on. At the time, in 1989 or so, when the station first hit the air, Eric Clapton had new music, Stevie Ray Vaughan had new music, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of classic-leaning bands that we could play, along with Ozzy and all the classic rock that we started with. But rock stations have to evolve. There are only so many years in a classic rock station. If you don't start playing newer stuff, it just gets old. Anyway, long story short, we saw Aerosmith a lot. They came to Birmingham, they came to Atlanta, they came to some smaller cities. It seems like we were always going to an Aerosmith show and always had backstage passes. Now, these are the years right before digital cameras. So if the band or the label didn't pay a professional photographer to come and take pictures of you with the band, then it didn't happen. A lot of the Atlanta shows did. Friends of mine on Facebook and other social media will see me every once in a while post these black and white pictures with bands that are really good pictures. It's because I didn't take them. There was professional photographers. Most of them were Rick Diamond. He's a friend of mine on Facebook, and he's a photographer in Atlanta who I believe is retired now. But anyway, he was paid by record labels to be backstage to take pictures of program directors with rock stars and things like that. It helps promote the groups and build stories and that kind of thing. So that's why a lot of my pictures are black and white and kind of artistic, because they were taken by a professional photographer. If you didn't have that, and a lot of times in Birmingham, Alabama, it didn't rank high enough to have a professional photographer there, we basically got those album flats you used to see in record stores. They're cardboard. It was like the album, and you could flip them over and they made walls, artwork. They would bring these flats to us with Sharpies, and the band would come in and sign those. So I have several Aerosmith flats that are signed, but we didn't get any pictures back then. And I do have a lot of other. Black Crowes signed a few of those. That was a thing to do for a little while. Anyway, that's why I don't have any pictures with Aerosmith, but I have all sorts of Aerosmith stories and autographs. They were a great band to meet. You know, I only met them from 1989 on, so it was after they gave up drugs and got clean and sober and cleaned up their act and really took their careers very seriously. And when they would come backstage, if you've never been backstage at a rock concert, you're basically led back there by the radio disc jockey, maybe usually somebody from the record label or a representative from the band. And they take you back into a room and you wait, and the band usually comes in. Everybody meets them, you get autographs. These days you take pictures, and then the band leaves. When Aerosmith would come, first the tour manager would come in and say, talk to everyone. Steven will be the last one to leave, and he will make sure he talks to everyone. So don't crowd Steven when he walks in. Don't make the other guys feel bad. Talk to all the other guys, and then Steven will get to you. And he'll be the last one to leave the room. And I swear, every single time we went backstage to meet Aerosmith, that is exactly what happened. Tom Hamilton, the other guys would come in, then Joe Perry would and Steven would be kind of one of the last persons to come in, but he would make sure he would spend time with everybody in that room. He would talk to them for a minute. He would sign whatever they wanted. Back then, somebody had a 110 Instamatic or a Polaroid or something like that. But most of the time, there were no pictures. He would just sign things, and all you had to do was talk. A lot of times, Tom Hamilton and I would talk that somewhere down the line we're related. We got to see these guys so often they started recognizing some of us. And I had very long hair at the time, so I was kind of recognizable. Steven was always the last one to leave. He was always a sweetheart of a dude. They were all great guys. There were a few times later on that you could tell that this was something they had to do, that they probably wasn't their favorite thing. But if you engaged them in real conversation, they would light up and they would get into a conversation. They were interested in meeting their fans and hearing what you had to say. They were really good with kids, I remember. They were just always gentlemen. It was great to see, and their shows were incredible. I'm not the biggest Aerosmith fan. I don't listen to Aerosmith all the time, but I give them their due. They are the American Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. They were the hard rock band in the 70s from America that was doing what Led Zeppelin was doing everywhere else. They had the wild parties. They played the hard rock. They got on the radio. They were living the rock star lives with jets and craziness. Aerosmith was doing it. And still, they are the quintessential American rock band. Had they decided to bow out in 2024, great. I wish they could have done a final tour. But I got to be honest, as somebody who saw a lot of the bands at their peak and their heyday, I'm not interested in some of these final tours. Sure, it's great to see them one last time, but I saw them when they were young. I saw them when they filmed those videos and recorded those albums. When the Eagles took many years off and did solo things and whatever, when they got back together for the final tour, which was over 25 years ago now, it was 5 guys sitting on stools. And they were charging a lot of money at the time to go see that. Meanwhile, artists like Pink Floyd were doing stadium tours with surround sound and inflatable things. And the Rolling Stones were doing stadium tours with big inflatable things and fireworks and pyrotechnics. And the Eagles came out and did a quiet evening with acoustic guitars all sitting on 5 stools. I saw Don Henley in the 90s right when his solo career was doing really well with The End of the Innocents, all that. Really great show. He played drums for part of it, especially the Eagles stuff. He'd come out front and be a front man for some of the solo stuff, and it was really good. But the Eagles reunion final tour that continued and still continues to this day, that kind of set a precedent. And more bands started doing those kind of retrospective final tours. Not talking about Kiss, because what, they're still, didn't they just finish finally? Maybe. It'll never be over. Anyway, that kind of set the precedent. I mean, we did have some retro tours, bands would get back together, but it was more, the bands were trying. Yes kept going for a long, long time, and they're still around now, but there's one or two guys that have ever been in the band. The rest are all new players. So after 99, 2000, you're seeing more of these, well, let's do one last tour from everybody who's ever had a hit. They've done package tours and all that. Then we started with the holograms. There's a Ronnie James Dio hologram. There's a Michael Jackson hologram. They actually tried to mount tours and stuff. Some people were interested in that. For me, if you're going to go that far with replicating a dead artist, just go watch old concert videos. Michael Jackson, Ronnie James Dio, Queen. There's some great videos out there. You can go watch them in their heyday. They're all being remastered now in 4K with surround sound. I would rather do that than go to a concert where there's a band trying to sync up with a fake digital version of that famous person. That's kind of sad. I mean, you go to the Wax Museum in England, Madame Tussauds, I guess. Is that's your kind of thing? I don't need that. And some of these artists who should have bowed out by now, who aren't using the technology and doing weak shows, I don't know what's worse. I certainly don't want to pay a high ticket price to go see someone mime a song. But on the flip side, if they're out of tune or have pitched the songs way down because they can't hit the notes anymore, I don't know what's worse. So anyway, but nostalgia is a great thing, and a lot of people didn't have the blessed life I had, where I saw everyone at the peak of their game. Like those Aerosmith fans that have just discovered them over the last few years, and now they don't ever get to see them live. That's kind of a sad thing. But then again, will we have wanted them to see Aerosmith on their final tour when they can't jump around like they always could? Maybe. I don't know how good the last tour I saw, which was several years ago, was really, really good. But these days, a lot of artists are touring with a backing track because the show is more important, they say. This is the argument I've seen on a lot of YouTube videos lately, especially with some of the Olympic singing. I mean, even Celine Dion was singing to a backing track. I understand doing it in something like that. The Super Bowl is rarely live. Prince was live. A few other artists are live. Sometimes the microphone is live and none of the rest of it is. I get it. You have a finite amount of time. You have like 10, 15 minutes where you can entertain a crowd. You're millions, if not billions of people watching on TV. It's important for it to sound great, and it's hard to sound great in a stadium. I have always understood why the Super Bowl isn't always live. I get that. But when you have certain artists charging several $100s to see them in a large arena or stadium, and they come out and they're not really singing, or the guitar player's not really playing, or I find that is a fib. Now, again, some of the more pop artists who put on the bigger shows say, well, they're dancing and they're doing other stuff, and it's hard to sing doing that. And I get it. I saw Madonna several times at the peak of her career. She was really good at it, but still had a hard time singing and dancing at the same time. Before pre-recorded stuff, she had some songs that were a little rough because she had to execute the moves. But it was part of the show when you understood that. She's a hardworking woman up there on stage. Now I'm sure the shows sound perfect, and the dance moves are probably perfect as well. Well, the dancing is real. The vocals usually aren't. On a lot, I'm not saying Madonna does or done. I don't know when her last tour was. Even some of the big young artists are now using backing tracks because it has to be perfect. Their reasoning is these fans have paid thousands of dollars to see the shows. Well, first of all, paying over $1,000 to see a concert is ridiculous. I understand the price of eggs is up and inflation, all that stuff, but it's gotten out of the realm of reality to see one concert. To see one concert when you can still buy the concert for $20 to $35 on Blu-ray or 4K later. I don't understand. They'll say the cost of the venue, the cost of this, the cost. No. It is the Ticketmasters and Ticketmaster and Live Nation have pretty much done that to us, and we let them. That's a whole nother podcast. I think I did one about a year ago on that whole craziness. There's no reason to charge the prices that they're charging. I paid $250 a ticket to see the Foo Fighters last time I saw them. It hurt to pay that much. The show was absolutely worth it. It was the first time they'd played West Palm Beach in 7 or 8 years. The crowd was sold out and just insane for the show. It was an amazing night that I will always remember. But not every concert is worth that. I used to say when we were sitting in a stadium and seeing Pink Floyd and their incredible show and we had paid less than $100 a ticket, I said, I'd pay over $100 to see this show. It was amazing. It was in surround sound. They had pigs that flew over and beds that exploded, things like that. It was a pretty spectacular show and worth the money. And I'm not saying a giant show with a whole bunch of dancers and musicians isn't worth that kind of money either, but there was a family that paid, $20,000 to go see a show for the 5 of them? That's insane. That's a year of college for one of those kids. Anyway, or at least it used to be. Not to get off topic, but I think it's great that Aerosmith decided to bow out when they couldn't do the show anymore. When they decided not to rely on technology and go, you know what? We just can't be the Aerosmith that you remember. So crank us up, listen to our music. Thanks for the years. You made our dreams come true. Dream on. Have a great one. I respect that more than anything. They're not ripping off their fans. They're not trying to be something they can't be anymore. They're going to, they were very careful to say they retired from touring. They didn't say they've retired from recording. I'm sure Aerosmith is not done. This will be the time when they put out probably a last final kick-ass rock album. I would do. That's what I want from Aerosmith. Give me a Rocks 2025. That would be awesome. But anyway, I think it's great. I think they looked at the lay of the land, and these days bands are getting called out for lip syncing, for miming. There's a lot. Just Google it or check it out on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of videos proving that a lot of artists are out there faking it. Yeah. Look, I've been backstage at hundreds, I'd like to say thousands, but at least hundreds of shows. Every once in a while, there's a band that has some programming, a click track, maybe some keyboards and stuff that are mixed in that there's not a musician playing it. It used to be on tape. Now it's digital. I don't have a problem with that. If you need to embellish your sound, that's not taking over lead instruments, and that's not faking it for the audience. That's just making it sound a little fuller. But you got a drum track playing, you got a guitar track playing, you got a vocal track playing, a lead vocal track playing that a lead singer is singing along with, kind of. That to me is faking it. And it's not easy to be a musician. It is hard work to be up there under those hot stage lights, although LED must be a little cooler these days. It's hard. It's hard to hit the notes. It's hard to stay on pitch. It's hard to perform. But that's why they're in the life. They love it. I love what I do. They love what they do. They can't imagine doing anything else. And if Aerosmith says we can't do it at the level that we need to do it as a band, we're not going to do it. And as brothers, we're going to stand down. Total respect. Sad that it had to come to an end, but it was coming to an end anyway. This was called their final tour, the Peace Out Tour. It was supposed to be last year, and they postponed it to September of this year, and now it's not going to happen. But it was the end anyway. They just had to move it up a little bit. I'm sorry Stephen hurt his voice. I hope it gets better. I hope they record more albums. I hope they are highly successful later in life. They should be. They deserve it. They've had a great career. But not faking it for their fans just to make some money. Kudos to Aerosmith. And thank you for listening. Wow, this turned out to be a long podcast. I didn't know I had so many opinions. I do really enjoy Aerosmith. They were always great. I wish them well in their retirement from touring and whatever else they have going. Scott, I'm ROCKFILE. If you'd like to support my channel, my links are below. Have a spectacular day, and thank you for listening.